What makes me me, a big part is probably the influence I've had from my mom. She influences me a lot as far as like character, how to like, she's the person I look for as to like how I should be as a human being. But I think what makes me me is like my faith, my beliefs that shapes a lot of the values that I hold. But then also, I just care. The main reason why I went to higher education was because of my mom. It was something where like growing up it was ingrained in us, like you have to go to college. It was never like a questionable thing. It was like you're going to. But
through that process of knowing that you had to go to higher education, did you know you were undocumented?
yes.
When did you learn that you were undocumented?
And ever since we arrived to the United States, it was something that was very clear to us. As
right.
far as like the status,
Yeah.
like
So
I knew.
You were 8 years old, and from then you knew.
So I was 8 when I was 7 when I arrived, turned 8 like the same year. But it was something that like we knew that we were like, oh, okay, we're coming. We don't have documentation, and although we understood it, we didn't know what it meant. Like I was just like, oh, okay, like we don't have the same thing as other people, but to me it was just like, all right, we just don't have that. I didn't really understand the obstacles of not having documentation until my graduation from 8th grade going into high school. Because that's when I attempted to apply for a college readiness program, but they declined me because I didn't have a social security number. So that's when I was like, wait, what? I was like, why can't I do it? Like I have the grades. I was a salutatorian for my middle school, so I was like, I know I'm smart. And I was like, I know I could do this, but it was just that obstacle. So that's when I was like, oh, okay.
And now, how did that affect you proceeding from then on?
From then on, that's what showed to me that I had to be creative. Like I had to be creative as far as getting opportunities, and that's also what showed me that I had to work double the time or like harder than others to just be at the same spot where they were.
Okay. And did that shy you away from pursuing other colleges? And what led you to Fullerton?
It didn't shy me away because since I was so passionate about my education, college was something that was super exciting to me. I was like, oh yes, can't wait. I was like, wow. The only thing that limited me as far as my college was knowing that I couldn't apply out of state and knowing that I wouldn't be able to do like study abroad to begin with, because at that point we still didn't have a lot of information on advanced parole. But a thought that did cross my mind was I needed to stay within California just because I didn't know how friendly other states were as far as towards documented or undocumented folks as a whole. And so I chose universities around my area that had a variety of majors. And Cal State Fullerton was the first one to accept me, and I was on the wait list for Long Beach. And I came to the orientation for Cal State Fullerton and I fell in love with it because the energy the students had, and then especially the dorms for the freshmen, it looks like Tetris pieces. And I loved it. I was just like, I could see myself here. Yeah.
So the aesthetics.
Yeah.
Cool. So now do you remember where you were and what emotions you felt when you first heard Obama announce DACA?
I was watching Univision at home with my mom. We were watching the news. She always just puts the news, and we just like, we'll do our own thing, but we'll listen to the news as it's happening. And so she's the one that called me to the room to like watch the TV announcement, and she was like, they said something about a type of permit for undocumented students, and I was like, what do you mean? And we listened to it, but we were very kind of like, I don't know the word's weary, but we were just very skeptical about it. We were like, what? Is this true? Like, could they do something? Because it was something like where we were aware that people knew that they were undocumented immigrants, but also there wasn't anything for undocumented immigrants as far as like resources, especially from the government. And so it was something that we were super skeptical about. But the community center in Pasadena, there is a lady, her name's Enna, she's not a lawyer or anything, but she's really well informed, and she has a lot of trust of the community. So she held kind of like these town halls to give information on what the program was, what were the requirements, how to apply for it, what it looked like, and like what was the certainty of it. And so we went to that, and after learning more about it, I was the first one in my family to apply for it. And eventually my siblings did it as well. But it was something where like we tested the waters with me, and we were like, okay, let's see. At least it was something where we were like, okay, worst case scenario, they have all our information. Best case scenario, it is true, and it's gonna be helpful, and it's gonna help me. Pretty much the goal was to help me get through college.
Right.
Because it would give me that security of not being deported, as well as giving me the ability to be able to work and find other opportunities through that permit itself.
And before that, were you?
Yeah, I was, and I feel like it was just kind of like this, what's it called, like a storm happening ever since like the elections came out. And I remember being in the Dreamers Center the day the Donald Trump was gonna like announce as president, and after that we knew what it was gonna like, what waves were to come as far towards like DACA and like the termination of it, because that's something that he had promised throughout his campaign. And so it was something where we were all really sad, and we were mourning it since the election. And so I knew it was an announcement that we knew was coming, but we were still hopeful that something might have been different. That day I was working and I had classes, so I knew that I couldn't listen to the announcement before I went throughout my day, or else I was going to be emotionally unstable and it was not going to help. And so I remember at that time I was working at the Carl's Jr. on campus, and the TVs were on, and I was just like la 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 la, and I was just like distracted doing everything else but looking at that. And whenever I heard people even mention anything, I would just like avoid until I was done with my classes and work. And that's when I like looked at the message that was giving out, because I was really interested in the rhetoric that they were going to use as far as to like why it was terminated. And yeah, it was something where I was like, I expected it because I knew it was coming. It was still kind of like a mourning, because it felt like, damn, like now what? Like I'm not even done at this point. Yeah, it was my junior year, and so I was just confused and concerned. I'm also kind of like lost in what the rhetoric was. Like it didn't make sense, and I was like, what do you mean? But it was also something, I had an experience that I had another friend in my class that she, like even within the undocumented community, there's like I would call it like a pyramid of privilege, because there's people that have things, some type of security, whether it's DACA or something else, and then there's people that don't have anything.
What, can you give me some of those examples?
Yeah, so it'd be as far as like anybody, potentially like a TPS holder, and even the privilege of that, if they have a certification that allows them to work as something as an independent contractor. And so there's like, I feel like in that sense, people have some type of work stability, and then there's the folks with DACA that have like the work stability as well as kind of relief from deportation, and the people that have nothing. And so I had a friend that had nothing. And she was the one consoling me when the DACA announcement came out. And it was just kind of like a slap on the face, because I was like, why are you consoling me? Like, you know, you've never had this opportunity, yet you're here consoling me. And I was just like, damn. And that's kind of what like shook me into the fact that it was never a permanent solution. It was something that gave me like a little relief, and I was distressed. And to a certain extent, I did take it for granted. And I was just like, this is great. Like, it should be here until I graduate. And I counted on it. But then again, it was just like that reality that like, hey, things could change.
What kind of information did you have?
I had so much, because I was such a great student. And so I literally had a diploma for every year. So I was like, awesome. And I was like, this is to my benefit. And so it was like school transcripts, any volunteering that I did, like logs of hours, the diplomas from my school, report cards, whatever report card might be, pictures, like I literally had my school IDs, any of my dance pictures I took too. And so literally anything that had a date, that had me in a location or something within, like, that you could be like, okay, this happened, I could prove that it happened in the United States, was proof. So anything, if I went to the zoo, I saved that ticket. If it had my name, even better.
And you presented all this.
Yeah, and so it was something where like you literally have to build your case for it. So you fill your applications, you have your proof, and then from there.
How did you feel during all this? What kind of emotions were stirring in you?
I was still a little bit like in disbelief because I was still skeptical about it. Because I was just like, damn, like I'm giving them literally everything. I was like, here's my whole private life. Here you go. And so it was a little bit like, there's a word for it. When vulnerable.
Oh yeah, because everything.
Yeah, and so it was like very transparent, very vulnerable. And so I kind of had to like trust that this program was to be a benefit. And thinking of like the facts as far as how it's an application that has to be renewed every 2 years and it wasn't cheap. I was like, all right, makes sense. They're getting money from it, go work. It's like a give and give type of situation. And so after my application was actually sent, that's where I was like anxious. And I was just like, anxious both in a positive and negative way. Positive because I was like, what if I do get approved, and what if I do have a permit, and what if I could work and I could help my family out? And then the other was anxious in the sense I was like, well, what if they show up someday? Now they have all the information. Like, what could stop them from coming to our specific location?
Is that still a fear in you that you might get deported?
Yeah. I don't think it's. I mean, as far as like with DACA, I know that as long as I don't commit any crime, I'm set. Like it's okay. But yeah, it's something where even for my family members that don't have anything, it's not even so much like a fear only for myself, but a fear for any family member that I have, especially that are working and traveling to work without documentation. That's like a constant fear where it's like in the back of my mind. I feel like worst case scenario, it would just be navigating the system without DACA, which is doable because I personally didn't do it and I can't take credit for that because right coming out of high school I had DACA, but I know that there are like live examples of people that were able to get all the way to their PhD without DACA. And just like manage to go about life without DACA, and I think two of like my family members that have managed without DACA. So I know it's not impossible, but to be able to do the type of work that I want to do, it goes back to being creative as to how to go about it. I know that for myself, within advice in a legal clinic that I participated in at school, my two options were either get married and get documentation through that, or also be petitioned by a job. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna be petitioned by a job to get my documentation. But lo and behold, I got married. And so that is an opportunity that I do have, and it's something that my spouse is very supportive of.
And so is that a different process as well now that you do have DACA and then you're also married? Mm-hmm. Is that more hoops you have to go through?
No, there's actually not more hoops. It's just also this time around completing my DACA application, I had to turn in my marriage certificate to prove like my name change and also the fact that I am married. But as far for renewing DACA, it doesn't do any, it doesn't sway it in any way, pretty much.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So getting involved at the Tellez Resource Center on campus was what introduced me to this community, because growing up I thought I was always like on my own. Even though I know my siblings were also undocumented, but through like my grades and like my colleagues, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm probably the only one that has DACA. And I was like, oh no. And nobody would speak about it openly. And it wasn't until probably my senior year that I knew of two other friends that, because I kind of connected the dots, and I was like, wait, you were born here. And that was just like, oh, okay. And it wasn't until like I was in college that they were like, oh, blah, 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 because I started to be more vocal about being undocumented. But yes, on campus, through the center, I've made a big community, and also I've been involved with a revamp. I don't even know how to say, but pretty much there used to be a club for undocumented students and allies before DACA. But after DACA came out, it was something where like it kind of dismantled, just because the folks that had DACA kind of had to like move on with their lives and kind of like put to work the resources they were now getting, and the folks that didn't have DACA kind of had to like go back to like figuring out, okay, how to keep moving forward. It's a branch of campus that works pretty much with like the government, and so the Office of Congressman Cisneros reached out to campus, and then campus reached out to the Talent Dreamers Research Center, and then the new coordinator at the Talent Dreamers Research Center reached out to other folks on campus to be like, hey, do you know of anybody that like would be good for this? And by all means, I'm not special, but I think for myself, it's something that through the Dreamers Center, working there and being a student that frequents it, I've grown to be very outspoken about being undocumented, and something that I feel comfortable with and I take pride in. That was already something that just brought my name into the conversation. And that's when I got the call, and I was like, yes. I was like, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, that makes you special.
I kept going. It was the pressure that I felt like going to the State of the Union. I felt like I needed to like remind people, and it was something that my mom, that saint, she brought me down from my high scores, because she was like, you didn't earn this, like you didn't do a contest, you didn't like write something, you're not an A student, I'm not, and all these other things. And she was like, it's not like you're any more special than your counterparts, but to her it was more like, it's a blessing. And I was like, yes, it is a blessing. And so it was something that I've tried to like shed light on, as far as like, I definitely think there was somebody far more involved and knowledgeable about politics to go. But I do think, and it's something that another staff member on campus shared with me, that he was like, you care. I'm like, that's what makes you special, that you care. And it's something that my spouse always tells me too. He's like, you care, that makes you special. And so it's something that, it was like a blessing. And I was just like, this is so cool.
That's cool. And how was your experience at the White House during that whole State of the Union?
Yeah.
What were you feeling when he was talking?
Yeah, so I didn't get to go to the White House. It was all Capitol Hill and between like the buildings. Really cool. They get everywhere through like underground tunnels. So I felt like a spy. My whole stay there was pleasant. Like I was mentally prepared for unpleasant memories or unpleasant interactions with people, but everything was extremely pleasant. Congressman Cisneros' team was by my side the entire time. And even going to the State of the Union address, sitting there was just like so impactful, because then I looked at it and then I was like, damn, this is the room where history is made. Like, this is the 116th Congress that was taking place, and I was just like, oh my gosh. And they gave you like a gold ticket as your invitation, so I felt like I was getting a Willy Wonka ticket. It's not the same equivalent, but I felt like it was that special. And so I was just like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. So it felt, and right before I went to the State of the Union, I stopped at the Archives Museum, and that's kind of what put it all together, because it made me think, wow, like all the historical events that have happened in America to make it what it is today. And just being in that room where people are very passionate, whether I agree with them or not, about what they're like standing for, was just really powerful. Very exhausting towards the end too. Very, very exhausting. Well, something that I was well aware before going was that every guest that the Congress member takes is a statement, basically. So because that was something when I got the call, I was also like, wait, am I being invited because he's trying to use me as a token of like, oh, the token undocumented student? Or am I being invited because he really cares about this cause and therefore wants to bring someone undocumented into the table? And it was a question that I had for him before I spoke to him over the phone, because he personally invited me and they told me he's going to call you, and I was freaking out about it, and I was like, oh my gosh. But it's something that I researched his campaign before I received his call, and it was something that he always spoke about. So I was like, oh, okay. Like, it's not like it just came out of nowhere and it was just like, oh, we're using this as a token, but it's something that he had been so consistent in his campaign about. But yeah, I knew that me going there was like a statement of like, this is what I care about, this is what I'm bringing to the table. And so that's why, knowing that I was a statement, I also wanted to make a visual statement. So I took a graduation sash that we receive at the end of the year for the Dreamers graduation, because the campus holds one. And so it's this like purple sash that says Dreamer, very visible, and it has the logo for campus. And so I made sure that if they didn't know, they would know I was a dreamer.
Okay.
It's something that growing up, I was like, I'm not American, and I don't want to be American. And it was something just because of remorse of hearing the Pledge of Allegiance in middle school especially, how it would say freedom and equality for all, and I was just like, the lie.